Welcome. How's everybody doing tonight? Southern California is full of untold stories, but even more that go unheard.
Authentic first-person experiences of life in Southern California. Real people amplified.
Each show is unique because of who's involved and where we are. Some of our folks are experienced storytellers. Many are not. And for some, this is their first time on stage or speaking in public.
And tonight's show is reflective of the range of voices, experiences, and perspectives of those involved.
Together, we explore our region one story at a time.
A special thank you to the California Wellness Foundation for their generous support of this project.
No show would be complete without a host. Please join me in welcoming your Unheard LA host, Bruce Lemon.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Unheard LA, a deeper listen. I'm your host, Bruce Lemon, and this is part 3 of our special 3-part virtual event version of our show. We've been taking this moment of social distancing and civil unrest to reconnect with our Unheard LA alumni, revisit their stories, and reconvene in conversation with our community around race in LA. We're coming together from all over SoCal. I'm broadcasting live from my garage here in Watts, and would love to know where you are safer at home. If you are near your keyboard, go ahead and type it in the comments or text it to a friend with no explanation, or yell it out to me like we're in a theater all together. The Unheard LA team is spread across our region from San Dimas to Baldwin Hills to West LA to Pasadena to Koreatown to Glendale, West Athens, North Hollywood, Silver Lake, and beyond. So let us know where you are. You don't even have to be in SoCal, but you are here with us. Over the last 2 weeks, we talked about the police, code switching, the pledge, jogging while Black, the rise in anti-Asian racism due to ignorance about COVID-19, Black hair, and more. These episodes are online in their entirety, right where you found this one. We'd like to encourage you to have these hard conversations and to listen to experiences of our friends and neighbors, especially those most vulnerable to both the pandemic and systemic racism. We continue on in protest and in mourning, finding ways to express our experiences. And today, we're revisiting many stories told through poetry that reflect on the ways in which racism has shaped the lives and experiences here in Southern California. A deeper listen that we hope can lead to a deeper understanding, compassion, and change. We'll hear from and be joined by Matthew Cuban Hernandez, Taz Ahmed, October Blue, along with Dana Ahmed, co-editor and developer of Race in LA, for a live conversation that we want you to play an active part in by asking questions and sharing your thoughts in the chat and with whoever you're watching this with at home. Now, words are powerful, and poets put them together in ways that make you go, ooh. Our first storyteller of the night teaches ooh in the classrooms to our youth in one of the communities hardest hit by the pandemic. Here is Teaching Through Trauma with Poetry by Matthew Cuban Hernandez.
California incarcerates more youth than any other state. Growing up, I was only 1 or 2 steps away from being pulled into the reality of the school to prison pipeline. For the last 5 years, though, I've worked with organizations like Street Poets, Inc. or the Arts for Incarcerated Youth Network, and completely devoted myself to teaching, writing, and performing poetry as a form of healing in juvenile detention centers. Last week, 2 of my favorite students wrapped their knuckles around each other. Now, in class, when we're upset or aggravated, we do push-ups, or we listen to really cool beats. The other day, on my sign-in sheet, in the comment section, usually reserved for the principal, one of my boys wrote, "Great class." It was the best part of my day. Now, at the Challenger Memorial Juvenile Detention Center, a youth prison named after a space shuttle that exploded, a failed mission. There is a dog pound at the front gates. You can hear whining and barking as your tires roll through gravel. In the yard, you can see the lights from the state penitentiary directly behind. Most of my boys joke and say that this will be their next step, but in my class, I show them poems. Always my favorite and always the powerful. I tell them there's a future in words. I show them my past, the dirt I crawled through, the voice I stumbled on, the same voice we can find searching the right conversations. We talk of memories, acknowledge and agree that we are the sum of what we remember. Their growth is my process, and I love to watch them blossom. Each poem, a petal forcing its way from a bud, a little more assured each time, each step a little more confident than the last. I don't just try to teach poetry to kids. I try to teach them how to walk in their own skin. I try to teach them how to own their skin when they walk, and sometimes I stand in front of a classroom and my students look like abandoned homes in the neighborhood the city has forgotten. I give them notebooks. I give them tool belts and talk them into believing that anyone can be a carpenter. I say, these words are nails. These poems are houses. Build it carefully because someone might need to live here. I look them in the eyes and say, the sentences you need to focus on do not end with a gavel, they end with a period. Let me show you how to make them with your own hands. Your story is important, so write it down, and they do. Some laugh, some cry. I say, it's okay. Our emotions are like lightning bugs, and if we keep them bottled, they will die. And a person who doesn't feel is just a photograph, and you are worth so much more than 1,000 words. You are an ocean of confessions, begging for an out. There is a key in your every syllable. The right combination can unlock dreams. I tell them to dream, then edit. I tell them a rough draft is one of the rare times in life you actually get a do-over. I tell them to wrap themselves in their stories. Don't get wrapped up in money, because then you'll become a hater, and haters get halitosis. That's chronic bad breath. I tell them, I don't know why, but it feels true. I tell them to feel for their truth like a switch when engulfed in all life's dark, that this universe loves honesty. So don't hold your tongue or your punches. Their process is my growth, and the only time I don't feel guilty prostituting my emotions for strangers, I tell them everything someone told me once. You can be great. Each poem, a petal forcing its way from a bud, a little more assured each time, each step, a little more confident than the next. I tell them I love them, because most of the time, they never hear that. I tell them no matter what society has shown them, no matter what their judge has told them, that they are not a failed mission. To me. Thank you.
America is made up of so many cultures. Many come here, many born or brought here. Some come with nothing more than what they can carry, and established the breadth of vibrant and diverse communities most clearly represented here in Southern California. Within those communities, the makeup of a people is even more colorful, with different hues, shades, and meanings. But here is Belongings in Brown by Taz Ahmed.
Belongings. Partition was my grandfather's Muslim ban. In 1948, my 21-year-old Nana escaped Kolkata, a Bengali Muslim on the flee, a student under dormitory arrest pretending to celebrate under the rainbow cover of Holi. He left with all he could fit inconspicuously into his knapsack. He disappeared across the Ganges. He reappeared days later on a plane landing in Dhaka, with nothing but all he could carry. During Bangladesh's independence, my mother was a Bengal third world refugee. At 16 years old, in Lahore, she left behind all of her things: her clothes, her books, her home, her friends, her community. All she could take was all she could carry in her one suitcase back east. They fled in 1972, after my Nana was released from the concentration camps. The family caught the first flight back out to Dhaka. As a child, I had wondered why she couldn't just go back and retrieve her things. They were hers, after all. When she died, we found her stamp collection from when she was a kid. She had kept them with her throughout her life, a collection that had gone around the world. She had always wanted to travel. My 20-year-old father immigrated to the United States, an economic migrant on an engineering visa. He was in the first wave of Bengali students after 1965's Immigration Act. On the around-the-world flight, he came with 2 suitcases filled with the necessities for starting over. Probably with some spicy masala, probably with some sweet gur. When he landed in Los Angeles, he shared a place with 8 other men, staying on Western and 3rd in what is now known as Little Bangladesh. He sold his first house for $25,000 to pay for the wedding where he was arranged to marry my mother. He brought her over from Bangladesh to LA in 1979, and in her belly, I was the 4-month-old fetus she carried. In 2017, I know better than to attach meanings to objects and things. I know better than to think capitalism holds my people secure. And I wonder just how many bags I'll be allowed, and just how much I'll be able to carry. And if all I can carry are these memories, where does this legacy lead me? Where does it leave me? What year will it be? Thank you. This one's called Brown. What color is my skin? It is brown. Coffee, almond, chocolate, dirt, earth, ground. It is the color of melanin, the color of muddy monsoon puddles and centuries of rice paddy fields. It is the color of decades of migration and of, I like the color of your tan. When my Teamster working mother would come home from a long day of work in the Los Angeles summer sun, she'd extend her forearms to me and say, "Look at how dark I got. Look at how brown I got." I'd look, her chubby fingers calloused, her arms worked and tired, and her brown skin was lived and beautiful. She survived till she couldn't. She gave me this brown skin. My skin is the brown color of insulted looks from other browns. For when I say, "Sorry, I don't speak your language," because this is the kind of brown that makes everyone think I should speak their own brown mother tongue. It is the brown skin of kinship. My skin is also the brown color of "speak English here," when in my reality, my Bangla pidgin tongue was formerly trained in nothing else. This brown skin is the color of Manzanar, Tijuana, Angel Island. It is the color of Mughal Empire, East India Trading Company, West Bengal, and Bangladesh. My skin is the color of Guantanamo Bay, Standing Rock, Flint, and Ferguson, of borders, airports, and detention centers. It is the color of go back to your own country and getting shot in the driveway for wearing a turban. It is the color of being murdered in a bar and then later being told, "You're Indian, my bad, I thought you were Iranian." It is being asked on a plane if you are carrying bombs in your bag and that all the illegals need to get out. My skin is brown, and I am a Muslim woman, and I don't need your solidarity. I need you to believe in my intersectional humanity, that survival is transnational, borderless, and migratory, that our liberations are intertwined. My skin is brown, like the poetry scratched into the walls, prayers carved into dirt floors, prose on protest signs. My skin is brown. My humanity deserves no loyalty test. They have painted my skin with the color of fear. Make no mistakes, it only goes skin deep. This brown is the color of resistance. Thank you.
As a son of Watts and a child of the East Side, I can tell you this: even with helicopters hovering over our homes, sirens drowning outside of their morning cartoons, and history class taking place in the living room, kids are still kids. Here is Between Hooper and Naomi by October Blue.
I would have never considered us homeless or squatters, but we were. My family lived in an abandoned apartment complex. Squatter, a term I didn't learn until my 20s. Mama would spend all day telling me how I would have my own bed, my own room, toys and all. I spent most of my childhood holding on to these fantasies. I grew up thinking I was living this narrow experience, when the reality is, most are one paycheck away from the streets. I grew up believing the stars shined brighter in my East Side realities than they did in others' West Side dreams. Vision kind of hazy, peering through gun smoke and weed chokes. I was born an urban baby. Similac first meal seeming to lack for nothing, yet everything at the same time. My block seemed long during my short-legged days. Had no shame busting out my $5 book of food stamps when the donut truck hit the block. Back doors open, drawers pulled out, one glazed twist, one old-fashioned, and a few extra donut holes I bought as payment. I had to get the best girls to turn the double dutch. Before the street lights came on, hit the corner store for a RC Cola, pack of Now Laters, watermelon flavor, and a note from my auntie. This is Miss Jackie. Send a soft pack of Benson & Hedges menthols with my niece. Still had enough change for a giant, icy cherry flavored, blackberry clearly Canadian, and a pack of salty plums with $5 I rained on my block. Friday nights, headed to the high school, navigating past the dog-guarded unlocked gates, a East Side safari. Making it just in time to be hit by the sweet, funky scent of elotes. $1 gets you the works. Parmesan, paprika, butter, lime, and mayonnaise. And we never questioned the mayonnaise. Saturday morning, a loud but distant sound, a squeeze horn, and an off-key soprano, tamales! My alarm clock. Rushed out the door, sliding in my house shoes because I didn't wear slippers until my adult years. One effortless motion, dressed and out the door, snatching up the last 2 queso tamales out of the black trash bag-lined pots. No champorado. I preferred Carnation's instant cocoa. Somehow I always forgot the salsa, rushing to get back to the house because cheap meals and morning smokes brought the cute boys out. Messy head, forgotten scarf, and I didn't want my neighbors to clown. I grew up seeing the stars shined brighter in my East Side realities because they did. It was family, revolt, backyard gardens, unrest, Bloods and Crips. 2.25 miles in total, and I cherished my small part of it between Hooper and Naomi.
Now we'll continue this deeper listen. For that, allow me to introduce you to the award-winning designer, developer, and data journalist. She's the data editor for KPCC and LAist and co-editor and developer of the Race in LA project. Here is Dana Ahmed. Dana?
Hi there, Bruce. So a little bit about Race in LA. It's a new series from LA KPCC that launched in June. We ask Angelenos how race and identity shape their day-to-day lives and ask them to tell us about their lived experiences in a personal essay. The essays are written by both community contributors and LAist staffers, and we publish a new one every Friday. Our goal with this project is to fuel meaningful and ongoing conversations about race.
Thank you, Dana. Now let's bring out our storytellers. Come on back in, Matthew Cuban Hernandez, Taz Ahmed, and October Blue. Thank you for joining us. So good to see you all again.
Hello.
Hey.
There we go. We're all here. Fantastic. So good to see you. Well, let's get into it, y'all. Let's start with a nice wide open question. Has anything changed since you shared your story with us on the Unheard Live stage? And I mean, obviously the pandemic has changed all of our lives, but has anything changed in relation to your story and maybe even some of the people that you talked about?
I'll go ahead and take that one.
Thank you, October.
Yeah. growing up in South Central. It's now South Los Angeles, I think. So the name has changed. Coffee shops have replaced our AM PMs. Homes are almost $1 million, and street vending is legal now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Big changes. Big changes.
Yeah.
How about you, Matthew?
Yeah, a lot's changed since COVID. Obviously, I'm not able to go in and do push-ups with the kids no more. But that facility, actually, Challenger, is basically on its way to being slowly shut down and decommissioned as a juvenile facility. So, who knows? Let's hope for 2021.
That is a big change. Taz?
Hey, the pieces that I wrote for this belonging, I think I wrote that. I said it was, I think Brown was in 2017 and belonging was before that. I think as an activist, like so much has changed in how we exist in the world and how we have a government that's not protecting us the way we need to be protected. So I just think if I would have written those pieces today, I probably would have gone harder because the world has changed so much.
Well, it's good thing you're still writing and still got more for us. Dana, throw it over to you.
Yeah, so I just want to dive right in. I mean, Matthew, I gotta say your piece, it hit me in the gut, man. I mean, a failed mission, Challenger. I mean, it's really interesting that you're talking about this facility now being decommissioned. I mean, the fact that, we got the pandemic going down. I mean, we've got this time of, racial reckoning. I mean, it's interesting to think about these kids who are sort of caught in the middle of all that in this very narrow world that they have. I mean, in this locked facility. I mean, what is it like seeing these kids who are sort of caught in this like school to prison pipeline? They don't see past what they don't see anything past. They don't see a future for themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like you said in your piece, they look at the penitentiary and they think, oh, that's where I'm going to end up. There's no hope for me to do anything else.
Yeah, it's a lot of different ways. I mean, there's a lot of like cultural exchange and a lot of learning that happens when you go to jail, when you get locked up, when you learn the game, when you learn a lot about whether it be gang or hood culture and stuff like that. And so a lot of the kids are like, hey, I'm looking forward to going there when they're young and in that mentality. And it's tough, I know that my whole position is never to look at what's right or what's wrong, because a lot of circumstances put people in situations to do the things they got to do to survive. And I can never, if I'm not willing to feed you, I'm not willing to talk to you about what you should or shouldn't do to get food. And I think like a large part of the board, that's the way, we could look at it. But I think now it's just even tougher for some of these kids that are locked up because, it was very difficult for parents or loved ones to go see them before. Now with COVID, it's even more difficult. The interactions that they have with people are even more limited than they were before. We're still able to facilitate workshops, but a lot of it is being done over the phone. And there's just a human element that's completely missing there. And I mean, like, most of the time when I go into the classrooms, what I think like the kids really need is like a big hug, you feel me? And it's really tough that on a lot of levels, I can't just grab them and be like, I know you just need a hug, fool. Like, but it's difficult. But I think the main mindset is being like, look, here's something that you might not have never seen before, know that you can do. And just seeing something new helps you realize, okay, there's other places I could be going.
So one thing I want to touch on for a second. I mean, I'm sure working with these kids, you see, I mean, how much they're actually capable of. It's like, I'm sure it's like mind blowing sometimes, like society sees them one way and then you get in there and work with them and it's like, whoa, this is a totally different kid. It's like, the world doesn't see the potential that I'm seeing right now. And it's sort of like, I feel that way sometimes with people of color and how the world sees us sometimes. It's sort of like this idea of, oh, if you're exceptional, if you're able to succeed, if you're able to do something great, then you're an exception to the rule. Like somehow that's not normative. That's not mainstream. That somehow shakes the boat. I mean, what does that do to us as people of color? Like, what does that do to your psyche? What does that do to your mentality? I mean, to us as adults, and then, I mean, to kids, I mean, that are coming up in this next generation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a brutal mindset that I think has a lot of systemic things that were like very much so calculated and thought out and placed into the mindset of a lot of people of color, for sure, for sure. And I think for me, there's always been this thing of like trying to codify what poetry does or how it can be seen as like a healing art form. There's now things like narrative therapy, which is essentially read a poem. How does a poem make you feel? Write a poem. Narrative therapy, right? And this is exactly like what I do as a vocation. But I think it's mind-boggling. Like there's kids who the teacher will be like, oh, he can't even, spell correctly, or he can't write his name, but this kid can write an entire 4-page story in complete bar form in almost iambic pentameter while telling a story using multisyllabics throughout the whole thing, and just does it in his sleep. And he's like, yeah, this is just, oh yeah, but they won't grade this, right? And so I think it's understanding what the students have as a skill and what students don't have as a skill. Sometimes that's, you can find a lot of the art and the culture and things. And I think like, when it comes down to just like those cultural experiences, and these are the conversations I've been having more and more, that I think like that is what's really missing in a lot of like the world we want to see and create, which is understanding that there is places for like the indigenous traditions would all have places for everybody. Like I was watching The Last Dance and they were like, no, Rodman had a place in it, in the whole scheme of what a team is, just like Native Americans would have that one almost mystical or mischief person that would have their spot. And then you give that person spaces to grow. So it's kind of that mentality that I think formal education doesn't offer students of color. And it's so often students of color or people of color are coming from places where they are steeped in cultural exchanges and knowledges, and then have to dull or nerf that when they go into spaces of codified, organized education, which doesn't work for everybody, because nobody, I'm not great at tests, but I can write some poems.
So you touched on something that's actually kind of interesting, this idea that in I guess in a school setting, sometimes the cultural backgrounds that we come from, it's like, oh, like the kid you were talking about, it's like, oh, he can write, a rap or a poem in iambic pentameter and multisyllabic verses, but it's like, he doesn't want to write an essay about Hamlet, or, what he turns in about some Shakespeare, like comparative analysis, is not what the teacher considers up to par. It's sort of like, you have to almost figure out how to meet people where they're at. And it kind of reminded me of something that was in your piece, October. Like the whole premise about it, the fact that we, like how we think of certain spaces and certain places. Like you're describing this very rich like childhood on the east side. And I mean, I know we talked about this a little bit before the show, but just the idea of like what that looks like from the outside to different people, and how where depending on who you tell where you're from, you get different reactions. So. Absolutely.
I as we said, we talked about it a little bit before, but I was sitting here listening to Matthew, and I was like, for lack of a better term, I hope no one is offended, but like the magical Negro is where I feel like growing up in South Central and having some education, being properly spoken, having a wide vocabulary, I learned very early on that there was a difference in the way people wanted to receive me. Even without saying, I knew that when I sat in front of my classroom and talked to my teacher, it was going to be very different than when I was hanging with my friends. And I think that came from those comments that I didn't understand, but it didn't feel good when I'm told, you speak so well, and it was just like, thanks. I knew what I felt, but I didn't know what it meant. And I grew up and it kind of shaped, it definitely shaped who I presented to the world versus who I was comfortable being. You know, it was always about making the people around me feel comfortable with me, you know.
No, 100%. I'm totally not offended by the, you know, this concept of the magical Negro. I mean, I'm totally feeling where you're coming from, because it's sort
I'm
of
offended
like,
by the use of the magical Negro in
I'm offended by
in
the
media
use.
representation.
There you go.
Yes,
There you
yes,
go.
I'm offended by the
For
use,
sure.
not the bringing
We
of
can,
it
yeah,
up.
we can talk
Yes,
about it.
yes, we can talk about it. We can definitely talk about it. Bruce hit that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's sort of like, if somehow you were able to assimilate into this idea of what, I mean, I'm just gonna say it, white people think we should be.
Yeah.
I mean, or, you know, people in power think we should be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sort of like, oh, you somehow must be like, you're special.
Yeah.
No, the rest of you can't, all of you can't be like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, I'm like, seriously?
It's been that as well. Like I've experienced it all, you know. Even a coworker thought that it was a compliment to tell me that I was different than the other ones, and I'm like, the other what? You know, I just couldn't believe, and really thought it was a compliment. Like, I'm letting you know you're different than the other ones. Wow. Okay. Because I say good morning, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. So yeah, being as we love to say, a East Side baby, had its very negative connotations to people who just heard of South Central, whether it was in a movie or a Boys in the Hood type movie. You know, they had this idea of what it was. Now, again, like we talked, it was dangerous. It wasn't safe all the time, but that goes into a whole other reason of why it wasn't, and why our communities didn't get the dollars and the tax dollars. So we can do that. But it's like, you know, I'm a human being. I'm a little girl growing up. I go to school, and, you know, although my books were most of the time 4 years older than everyone else's, my intelligence belongs to me, you know. So thank you for that question.
No, does anybody else want to jump in on that? Taz, do you have anything that add on in that vein?
I mean, I think the thing that I'm thinking about is the model minority myth, and how as Asian Americans we get pigeonholed into this whole good at math, and that, I mean, that was what I got growing up, was like, oh, you're going to be good in math because you're Asian. I was terrible at math, and I think the model minority myth came about because it was a wedge. It's a racial wedge. They were trying to pit races against each other, which is why the myth came about. Yet it was still being used by white folks to kind of like perpetuate this idea that Asian Americans are exceptional, but in a backhanded way. So I think it goes both ways. It's both sides of the same coin. It's just manipulating the races, right? Like manipulating people to fight with each other, to have competition, when really we're living in a white supremacist society, which has these structures in place to keep one type of people in power.
It's amazing how, sorry, go ahead, Dana.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, do you guys, what comes immediately to mind to me is, do you think that kind of thinking is rooted in people just being afraid? People being afraid of what we're capable of, and the fact that we could upset this status quo?
Yeah, of course. I think they're afraid. But I think it's structural. I think, I mean, as a Muslim American, I think what I have been seeing is the use of fear mongering and using Muslims as kind of like the punching bag. And by having a collective people to use as the punching bag, the fear turns out a certain kind of voter. The fear mongering right now is COVID. COVID is being used. That's what's keeping people unmasked when it just is very logical to wear masks out in public. And so, I mean, this fear mongering is a tactic. I just hesitate to make this like an individual issue, because I think we're all in this system of supremacy. We're all being manipulated by the society that we exist in. And I think truly, if we can educate all people and, you know, smash the structures that we're in, we wouldn't be at each other's throats like this.
And it very much seems like we are in that moment right now. I just want to point out there, if you have any comments or questions out there, if you're listening at home, go ahead and drop them in the comment section and chat section, and we'll try to get them into the conversation as we go along. But yes, I do believe we are at this moment in time where a lot of that education is finally happened. A lot of the information that has been wiped away because of racism, because of the desire to keep things status quo, and I bring this up often, like the pushing of the lost cause narrative at the end of, like the revisionist history of the Civil War that was actually indoctrinated into the children of America up until like the 1970s when it was in our textbooks. Like a lot of those things don't go away very easily, and it also, you know, there seems to be, not even seems to be, like, you can, this is just stating fact, you know, it's like America seems to pick a different group of non-white people to make the target and attack, and it keeps going, so that we're not only villainized in the scope of American media and American politics, but even within our own communities. You know, you talk about exceptionalism and being the one that made it, and how there's this dream that you gotta go and get far away and never come back, and not be like those people, not be like where you came from, not be like the people in your family. You know, like that's been part of the engine of white supremacy culture in our society and in our workplaces and our organizations, and it's in every facet of our society.
I do think it kind of what Taz was saying, it is a structure. And so when she said that, it made me also think about how when I was growing up, my mother would tell me when we went out somewhere, remember to act like you have home training, you know, and it was this idea that if your child demonstrated something that was wild or wasn't model behavior, then it reflected badly on you. So it was this generational thing that was taught about how you're supposed to behave. You're not supposed to raise your voice. You're not supposed to get, and then there was negative feelings or observations attached to that. If I'm laughing loudly, like my joy is unacceptable, you know, and I just, that kind of stuck out to me.
How much of that pressure to make sure that you're on your best behavior out in public is about not only reflecting on your mother or your family, but also reflecting on all of your people? Because you have to be the spokesperson and the mascot and like the everything, the representative for everybody that looks like you or share some of your ancestry.
Like no pressure, right?
No pressure.
You know,
right?
That's always been there too. And I even found myself for like, I catch myself doing it too, where you're kind of given the side eye, and then you have to check yourself, like, why am I looking at that person who's laughing loudly in a movie theater? It's a comedy, you know, but because it's ingrained, you sit there and you judge. But I will speak for me. I've caught myself being judgy, and I had to check it right away. Like, no. And I'm trying to break those generational ideas and confinements with my daughters, you know, however they feel like expressing themselves. I tell them the rule: as long as you're not hurting yourself or someone else, you are free to express yourself. That could be polka dots and stripes. That can be blue hair, like whatever that self-expression is, you have the right to that. You own that. And so that's what I'm trying to do going forward.
We have a.
No, go ahead, Bruce.
I don't want to get in the way of the flow of your questions, Dana. We have a question from Sherry out in the audience. It's a general question for any of the speakers. Is it fatiguing to educate people?
Yes.
And how do you not become defeated? It's a big yes.
You stop doing it. I don't know. I've been at this mindset where I'm like, I'm done educating my oppressor. I just feel like if you're ignorant to things that are just blatantly obvious, it's willful ignorance. And I look at that as an act of violence, honestly.
Yeah.
And sometimes I kind of respond in kind. And honestly, like that's just the place I'm at now. I'm not here to negotiate with you. Like, I'm honestly here to just smack you in the face if you like come too close to me with this foolishness. And I know that that's not, I'm not advocating violence for sure, but I feel like willful ignorance is an act of violence. And I think that we've turned every cheek that could be turned at this point. Yep. And again, I'm not trying to instill anything, but in my own personal world, in my own personal space, I'm not here to educate you. I'm here to tell you that you're foolish in probably the most vulgar way I can, and then send you on your way or delete you off my Facebook.
I am 100% there with you. Yes, to answer the question, yes. And it's exhausting and it's frustrating and infuriating. Particularly with what's going on now and the revolts that were happening and the rage against the machines that was happening throughout the city. I had a couple of people, not Black folks, not people of color, send me these like random text messages. Oh, how are you doing? And it's like, we haven't spoken since March. Like, are you kidding me right now? Or I had someone actually like on a work communication go, so what's going on in your city? There's CNN, there's Google, there, like, don't do that. And I'm much with you, Matthew, where I'm just like, I'm not doing it anymore. And I don't have a problem not doing it anymore, because it was exhausting. So you ask me a question and you might just get a blank stare. Like, we're not having that conversation. There's too many options for you to figure out and learn and talk amongst yourselves. I'm not doing that.
I think for me, one of the fun things about the podcasts that we had, for the past 5 years, I've had a podcast called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, featuring me and my co-host, Zara Norbash, another Muslim woman. And we would just have conversations with each other where we would center our experiences as Muslim women, just talking about whatever. But just the default of two Muslim women talking to each other was a very political act. We got a lot of emails from people who were like, can you please define this word or explain this word? Or, they wanted explanation. And we decided early on, this isn't for that. We aren't here to educate people. If they want to listen, we're going to open up our podcast to make it listenable. And in that process, it was a really great lesson for me on how we can actually like have solidarity where we listen to each other truly. If we, as poets, as writers, as podcasters, as content creators, center our voices and our experiences, and we don't dumb down what we put out there, but we let people listen in, people are learning from that experience. And I think that's the power of centering our narratives as poets, as storytellers, as writers, without having to dumb down. I hate dumbing down. I refuse to have these conversations, but I will gratefully have them buy my poetry book. They can buy that. This is my podcast.
I did want to say something on this though, real quick, which is that I'm totally down to like have a progressive conversation that challenges ideas and thoughts. But I think when we're talking about things that are like, is the sky blue? Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, the sky's blue because of the earth and the ocean and it reflects. I'm not here for that. Like, and I think those are the conversations that I'm like, I'm over with. But if somebody's like, yo, I really don't understand this, I really want to learn and figure out ways to be a better ally, I might still just point you in a different direction, but I'm gonna be nice about it.
Yeah. I'll have a conversation with someone who is aware and is looking for actionable items or ways they can more ways they can continue on the journey that they're on. But I'm not going to be your first stop on your like great awakening and your moment of understanding. And when I'm telling stories, or I'm working with other artists and we're trying to tell stories about our communities and about our people, I am absolutely not interested in doing that through a white lens, where we have to explain everything along the way so a white audience can pick it up. Because my entire life, I've been watching TV, movies, listening to music, all this stuff that comes through like a big white machine, and just had to figure that stuff out and catch up. So if I got to spend 30-something years catching up, then maybe you can do it for a couple months, that's
yeah, absolutely.
That's a thing.
I still don't know what a duvet is. I'm just kidding.
Oh, bro. I know what duvet cover is, at least.
Yeah.
We have a question here about responding in kind. And and I think this was probably from what you said before, Matthew. I can chime in a little bit. I know if you give me an ignorant question, I might give you an ignorant answer. And if your ignorant question is about, the origins of racism or whether something is problematic, and the answer is available everywhere you turn, that's what you're gonna get. But what do you think? This is open to everybody, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump on it and be brief. But I mean, I think, I think at a certain point, some things you're being willfully ignorant to, and I think those are the situations where I know you're trying to gaslight me. I know you're just trying to rile me up. So here I am, riled up and on fire, and giving you a response that you were clearly hoping to get. And then most of the time, I get into these arguments with people where they're like, well, why can't you just be nice about it? And I'm like, because you've killed everybody who was nice about it. Literally.
Facts.
You murdered every person in front of their family who was nice about it.
The and king so of love.
In their name, I'm good. I'm with the other dude who was like, listen to him or we got to do it this way. And,
Yeah.
I just think what it is for me is I don't want to spend the time to do it. I don't even know if my ability, my capacity is very, very short these days. So I don't even want to have that debate, racism isn't systematic. Why can't people pull themselves up from their bootstraps? Like all the triggers, all lives matter, like all the trigger things. I can't. I don't want to do it. I don't have the capacity to do it. To me, for someone in like Matthew said, I remember being so angry because my first Black history class was in college. And I remember going, what? Like there's this whole section of who I am that was just not talked about. And like you said, I had to then dig in and do the research. So for someone to tell me in a world of Google, because I grew, and I'm gonna tell my age, we had Encyclopedia Britannica when you had to do some research, and we was po folks, so we didn't have all the letters. We had to work it out. But what I'm saying is, like in this age of Google, for you to say, I never knew. We're not. That's it. I can't even engage that. Where'd you get that
information?
Yeah, I can't even Google. Engage that. Exactly. Yeah, can't do it. Won't do it.
So I have a question for you guys. All right. So I mean, clearly we're all tired. I mean, we're tired. We're tired. We're angry. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else. I'm pissed off. I kind of oscillate between all of these emotions depending on the day and when I turn on the news and what has happened now as to which emotion bubbles up to the surface the highest. But it's like, it's exhausting is the point I'm trying to make. I mean, obviously I am right there with you guys when you're saying, yeah, I don't want to be your, let me be your guide as to how I can tell you, this is why racism is bad. This is why this is this way. This is why this is whatever. I mean, yeah, if you want to learn, Google. But how do we, does that change the way that we are almost activist in a way? Does that change how we try and get people to change, well, not even to change their mind, but does it change the way that we have to, or that we do approach trying to, I don't want to say, I hate this phrase, change minds and hearts, because I don't think that's our job. I don't think it's necessarily, it's our job to change somebody else's mind and heart. It's like, go do what you want, it's your life. But I mean, to change systems, to change institutions, like to be activists, to affect change in that way.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, Tass, please.
Yeah, I think I do still think that we do need to change hearts and minds. But I'm a community organizer, and I think that's kind of what I was raised on. But I think the way we do it is in a way where we don't have to cater to the white gaze, and we can center the narrative around people of color, and we can center our experiences. I'm also a little hesitant to say Google things because a lot of my people's histories is not on Google. And so much of the work of historians and activists, is mining those stories and making sure that they're out there. So, I mean, but that being said, I think as, once again, we're all poets here. As I have 5 years of a podcast people can listen to, I've created content. There's so much content being created out there. I think that's where I'm just kind of like, but I'm also continuously gonna make more content. I'm a creator, I'm an artist. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm just not gonna do it in a way that dumbs it down for people. But I love writing pieces that make people cry. I think I have a public policy background, and I think like the things that I say in reports with data and public policy do not move people the way that a poem with moving words can make people cry. And all of a sudden they understand why they need to vote a certain way or another. And I think that's a very powerful tool to have in the toolbox to be able to move people. And I think that's something that I willingly do that without shame.
Sorry, go ahead. October.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, that's how it's changed for me. There's the unapologetic part. I used to poet things, and now I just say the thing because I get to say it, so I think that's where it's changed for me.
I would also say that I think there's something powerful in just saying it too. And I'll also say, I'm not sure if I have the power to change anyone's mind that doesn't look or come from where I come from. I think I'm super hype and super supportive of allies, because I think those are where people, when you look like somebody and somebody's telling you, hey, you should be doing this because of this, this, and this, you, for some reason, as humans, we tend to listen a little closer, or at least, whatever. But I think that's where really it is for me in my work.
So it sounds like almost the activism now is like, it's not so much, oh, let me tell you how we can fix this. It's just sharing our lived experiences. It's like sharing, whether it's through art or poetry or, or just expressing flat out what the emotion is. It's just getting that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of a twist because of the way we communicate, especially through social media. You look at things like Twitter, limiting like the amount of characters you can get your point across. So and like memes and stuff, people are finding like much more concise ways of delivering big pieces of information. And when it comes to the way that this country works and the way that these systems of oppression have been working for so long, a lot of that information is being spread and dispersed in such a way that the information is easier to find, easier to land, and the ways in which we can actually affect change is easy. Like if I just open my social media right now, I can easily flip through of like one or two friends, and I have all the numbers of all of my representatives in my community and in my local government who I need to call and email and harass until we get laws and the support that we need in our communities, and that people that are killing us in the streets are being held accountable and eventually arrested and convicted and incarcerated, not just going away like it's nothing. We're still saying Breonna Taylor's name because action has not happened yet, and we have to keep doing that.
So I want to touch on one thing that's sort of in the vein of what you're saying, Bruce. I mean, this idea that, one button click or a couple button clicks and you can affect change in a way, or at least work to affect change in a way that we haven't been able to do that before. And it's almost like this sort of like resistance, this form of like protest is like a different something that it's a different way of doing the same thing of achieving what we've always been trying to do, which is to topple these systems of oppression and systems of structural racism and violence. I mean, but one thing, Taz, that I remember us talking about before was how even though the circumstances of the things that we're going through right now haven't really changed, activism may have changed, but protest is this sort of it's a form of resistance, but it's also a form of us reclaiming our voices. And while it can be ugly and it can be, but it can be cathartic, that resistance can also be like a form of joy. I mean, it's because of, I mean,
Yeah.
why do you think that resistance is a form of joy? Is it in the results that it brings about or in the process itself?
I've been a part of a lot of these conversations, and research shows that people are more inclined to respond to messages of joy than fear. And I think also in the world of crystals and psychics and stuff, like there's this whole vibrate, like the fear vibration is lower and then the joy vibration is higher. So I think one of the things that I think about is that, like, as a society, I don't want to be in a hateful society. I don't want to have to respond to hate all the time. And I don't think that's really the kind of world I want to live in. That's not the world I want to imagine for us in the future. I want to live in a world that's joyful, where we all have rights and the ability to speak and the ability to live the way we want to live. So this idea of joy, right? And I think for protesting is, we always think that protesting is this place of violence. Like, you're going to go out, we see all these really violent images. I mean, the media manipulates what kind of images we see of the protests. But then when you're out there, you're in community with people. You're singing together, you're beating on drums together, you're chanting together. You find your friends that you haven't seen in a couple months because of COVID. And it's just really healing to know that you're not alone. And I think that's the part of protest culture and just activism that I think is often missed. Like, we're in this world of hate and fear right now that we need to remind ourselves that there is joy out there. And the reason why we're doing this is for a joyful future. We're trying to imagine a joyful tomorrow. And we can't lose that in this effort to fight and win.
Yeah. I was at the it was a couple weeks ago. I was at the standing Black Lives Matter protest against Jackie Lacey downtown LA, and we ended up marching through the streets. And as we're walking through the streets, there are people honking their horns and waving their hands out their sunroofs, out their windows. There are people in their apartments standing out their windows, banging pots and pans, screaming, "We love you, we love you, we love you." I've never seen anything like this, and also it was every type of person that you can imagine lives in this country was there in the streets together, unified. And it was so beautiful. And it's the type of America that I wish I saw represented on the news at night when they're talking about these protests, and they're showing us these burnt out cop cars that are typically just old cars that are parked near protests specifically to be set on fire, and give us those images that are supposed to terrify parts of America and people that don't know anyone that doesn't look like them. But there's so much joy out there in just the unity and the way people are working together and taking care of not just the physical streets, but the people that are filling those streets. It's really beautiful.
I think even more than, the joy in the here and now of the protest and of this coming together and that unity of resistance. I think it's also important to note how that joy translates and emphasizes and sort of contrast this historical notion that all we have is this ancestral trauma, that all we have is woe and glum and oppression and hate towards us, and that we're dealing with internalized trauma of racism and discrimination. I think that what that kind of experience that you're talking about in unity and joy and people coming together, Bruce, I think it counteracts this narrative of that's been cast upon people of color of somehow being bitter or tainted is the wrong word, but bitter or completely or traumatized to the point that we can't feel that happiness and that lightness and that levity anymore.
Yeah, like there's no other type of story you can tell. At the beginning, right after George Floyd was murdered, uh, like on all the streaming service, there were all these this big push for all these different films and TV shows about centered on Black voices, but they were all mostly stories of pain and stories of trauma and oppression, as if there aren't like Black filmmakers making joyful stories, like that. Those stories are out there, and not just in the Black community. Those stories are out there representing us, and showing full pictures of humans as they exist, with all the joy and all the ups and all the downs, not just steeped in the downs and the history of oppression and pain. We need more than that. I want my news feed and my social media feed and the stories I hear to be full of smiling faces of brown and Black and people just living their lives.
I think when you say that, it just made me think, like, I feel like it was a part of society's attempt to be accepting. So it's like we went from not being considered humans to this thing that needs to be taken care of because it's damaged, it's broken. It's like the three-legged dog. Like, I this is how I'm going to now relate to you, and it's through eyes of pity. So when you see a joyful Black person of color, and you don't know what to really do with that because they have no need for you. And I think that's where the issue comes in. It's like, if I'm happy, then you get the people calling the police because we're barbecuing. Like, I am living my best life. I have no need for you. I'm not asking for acceptance. I'm not asking to be included. I'm doing my thing. And that's a problem. Like, there's no need. And so I think that's where that, in my opinion, that's a part of that.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that I love about, not to toot my own horn about our podcast, but one of the things I love about our podcast, but also just listening to podcasts by other people of color, there's other Muslim people, is that there's so much laughter in it. And I'll listen to it and I'll just like think about, oh, how great is it to hear Muslim voices laugh on this podcast? And then you realize, oh, why is that such a unique experience? Is because mainstream media has only shaded us to look either looking for to be saved or to be terrorists and yelling. And no, there's not really a depiction of us laughing. And then you hear these podcasts which are usually independent podcasts and not run out of networks. And you hear the laughter. You're like, why does it have to come to this to hear us laugh and to experience joy?
Yeah, I think like joy is definitely a form of revolution or a form of resistance, just the act of it in general, just being joyful in spite of. And I think that there's a long history, a tradition of coping tools and how we deal with whatever is going on in the world and turning it into joy. I mean, you can go through how hip hop was created, where we just took the leftovers of every other musical genre and it was like, I guess we rap it, or even to the point of, we started this conversation with talking about how things are changing. And, I mentioned in my story, in my poem, that I've been doing things through the Arts for Incarcerated Youth Network, and the name has changed completely. Now it's the Arts for Healing and Justice Network, and I think what's dope about that, it's a great change, right? And I think what's dope about that is that so much things that we as people of color have been doing as tools just to do, whether it be making music, dancing, creating art, writing poetry just for the sake of doing it, being prolific, right? All of these things are now being codified as like, oh, these are actual healing tools that we've been using for centuries, right? That are now being put out to people to show. So I think that's dope. And I think that all encompasses what we do with joy and how we deal with trauma.
There's some in a common exchange about how tired can't be avoided. Maybe we take a rest and a relay race, like passing the baton back and forth. And I think this is one of those things where it's important to note that sometimes you do need to tap out of the fight so you can tap into the joy. and keep that exchange flowing back and forth. Like I protect my Sundays and I go out on a bike ride with my brother and his family. And that is my time to tap into that source. And then on Monday, we back at it again, you know, maybe even Sunday night, I'm back at it again, but I gotta have that time. I'm wondering, what are you doing to maintain, to sustain yourself while you're in the midst of this new revolution?
Oh man, it's so hard. I think I had a health scare in February. So I had to stop. I didn't work. I just stayed home. Went deep into the woo-woo healing world to take care of my health. And I feel 100% a lot of my health issue came from like burnout and from stressing my body. And I'm an older activist. And I think if you burn yourself out in your 20s and 30s, that's what's going to happen. Like your body literally will not take it. And it will tell you that it can't take it anymore. So it was really hard for me actually to see all the protests happening on the streets and not being able to participate. So I mean, I did social media activism, I guess, but this is the first uprising where I haven't participated. I was like out there for Occupy Oakland. I was out there for the protesting the war in Iraq, and I could not be out there for this because it would compromise my health. And it was hard, but it was also nice to just step back and go like, all right, the youth are gonna like lead this and run with it, and I don't need to be there, and I can, you know, fund something, put money somewhere, but I need to focus on healing. It was hard. It was very hard.
Yeah, the youth and every movement is typically led by the youth.
Exactly.
And I think we're all around the same age range. We're not elders.
We're
but
using the word
not
youth,
young.
so we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're still youth, but I'm saying we're all in the position where we can, you know, we can be in the streets, but also we can be support for the younger generation through mentorship, through just looking out, through passing information, through passing knowledge, to be sure that they know that we are there to support them in this and keep them from burning out. You know, people have been doing this one way for a very long time, pushing yourself to the extreme. And then once you burn out, then you take a break. But if we keep waiting until we burn out to take a break, we're just going to burn out and not exist.
Yeah,
And
our
those
bodies
breaks-
literally will not be able to take it.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I am. If I heard your question correctly, what are we doing for our joy or during this time? And for me, it was, and I was really messed up for a couple, but what I'm doing is nothing. I had to tell myself that it was okay not to be okay. And I was trying to force poems and, you know, because I have to document and I have to, and, you know, my body, because it remembers, was like, no, journaling is fine right now. You can just write down your thoughts to get them out, because I'm an in my head type of person. So I'm doing nothing right now.
That sounds fantastic.
Yes, it does.
I would say for me, it's learning to say no with yes energy. You know what I'm saying? Ooh. I don't know where I saw that meme, but I'm like, get that tatted on you, boy. Learning to say no with yes energy.
I like that.
That and trying to find ways to create and seeing how that creating can support what's going on. I think, Taz, I was in the same boat when a lot of the protests were happening. I was like, I don't know if I can be out there physically all night.
Hard.
You know what I'm saying? But I was like, but I'll show up in the morning and sweep some streets. You feel me? Like, you know, I dropped the album on my birthday, and instead of selling it, I was like, any money you give me, 100% of proceeds is going to Black Lives Matter LA. We raised like $1,000. It's not a lot, but it's $1,000, you know, from something that was nothing. And so even the smallest places that I can find where I can offer support, my wife and I have been doing these poetry breakdown classes where we literally just find a poem every Wednesday, hop on Zoom, and we talk about the poem for an hour. And we all just leave space for each other. And finding all these spaces where people can speak to each other, that can come into these quasi-safe spaces, because even Zoom gets hacked sometimes. I've been victim of it once before. You know, it's a really beautiful thing. And I feel like even if we reach, 10 people from the conversations that we're having, these are the things that bring me joy and bring me back to centered, because that burnout is real, like we're talking about. And sometimes that break that you need to take is for a week. Sometimes it's for a month. Sometimes it's for a year. Sometimes people get traumatized from that burnout and they can't come back. And so it's important that the support is from all around. I'm in a position now where I was still able to continue working and bringing in some type of funds for myself and my family. But I know so many artists who tour for a living who couldn't. And so finding ways to put money in different artists' pockets, this is how I've been finding ways to stay sane in all this while talking to my cat.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And if your cat starts talking back, you might be burned out.
Yeah, he talks a lot. He needs his own podcast, actually.
Well, I think we're at a good place. Speaking of rest and doing nothing, you've all brought so much to this conversation, and this conversation is going to continue with everyone at home and everyone in the comments. And I encourage you all again to keep having these conversations, keep listening, even if these conversations are hard. Good, it's supposed to be. Keep at it. Keep working. We are all one big community. We're all here to support each other. We're all here to keep doing this beautiful internal work so we can create the country and the society that we want it to be. Are there any last like parting words anybody wants to share with our audience? Any thoughts or anything or any resources you'd want to throw out where people, I know you, Matthew, you said you're hosting that poetry breakdown class. Like, where can people find that? Taz, I know you got your podcast. You got 5 years of stuff. Like, please tell us where we can access all this information so we can get what we need to keep this going.
Yeah, so Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, you can download it wherever you listen to podcasts. We ended in February because we were tired, but you can listen to it. We have 5 years of stuff. I want to shout out an organization called Vigilant Love. We do a lot of work with the Muslim and Japanese American community. We came about after the San Bernardino shooting happened a few years ago, and we do a lot of solidarity work. So if you're looking for an outlet, an organization to do solidarity work with, or just learn more, just check them out. Vigilant Love.
Thank you. Matthew.
Okay, cool. I was like, I'm gonna leave it for the homies. Okay, something I want to leave y'all with is that I'm actually a really nice person. I'll totally cook you lunch. I feel like I've been very aggressive in this talk, and I want y'all to know I'm literally a hug personified as a person. But I'm also a grizzly bear if you talk that talk. But I do want to invite y'all that I work with an incredible organization called Street Poets Inc. They've been around for like 25 years in Los Angeles doing really dope work with incarcerated youth and healing practices and indigenous teachings. Every single Tuesday, we have a writing and meditation circle from 4 to 6 o'clock on Zoom, just like this. It is open to anybody who feels like they want to find some healing, get some words. We go to deep places. You can be a fly on the wall. You can participate. It's open in here for you. We've had people from all over the world join us, from hospital beds to little kids. And I would love to see your face and love to offer some support and healing and maybe some good writing if you get a chance to join us. But check us out at Street Poets Inc. And then my wife and I do poetry workshops on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays, all the time under the organization Spoken Literature Arts Movement. So you can find us there. And I'm Matthew Cuban, and I'm always doing kind of crazy stuff. You can find me on all things.
Thank you. October Blue.
I guess my final would be one of my favorite African proverbs, and it's why I love Unheard and storytelling. And it says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
Let's go.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana, do you have anything else you wanted to put out to the world?
I just want to thank the three of you and thank all of our Unheard performers who have contributed to these just mind-blowing conversations over the past 3 weeks. Just really opening yourselves up to to me and Bruce and to our audience here at home. And just thank you. Thank you for helping keep this conversation going.
For hosting it.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Everyone, that is our show. As Dana said, we've had some great conversations these past 3 weeks, and we want to keep this momentum going. And we want to help you have your own deeper conversations about race with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. Keep an eye out for more details in the coming days on LAist.com. Thank you to the folks at KPCC and LAist that make Unheard LA possible, to Matthew Cuban Hernandez, to Taz Ahmed, to October Blue, and the rest of our extended Unheard LA family. Special shout out to you, Dana. I'm here for Race in LA, for being a very special part of this special series and being the catalyst for important conversations like this. We will continue to be eternally grateful to the California Wellness Foundation for their generous support of Unheard LA. All our KPCC and LAist members, you make everything we do possible. Thank you all so much, everybody. Everybody has a story. So what's yours? Share with us at kpcc.org/unheardla. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our Unheard LA newsletter. It's the best way to be the first to find out about what's next. Once again, thank you for joining us for a deeper listen. And remember, whatever you do, don't leave your story unheard. Bless you. Good night.
Thank you.